Have you ever sat in a room full of people and felt completely, utterly alone, not because nobody was talking to you, but because you realized that nobody in that room was actually saying anything? That feeling, that quiet, invisible wall between you and the rest of the world, isn't a disorder. It isn't a flaw. And it definitely isn't something you imagined. For INFJs and INTJs, it's a lived experience so familiar it almost feels like background noise. But here's the thing most people get wrong about it. It's not hatred. It's not arrogance. And it's not some superiority complex dressed up in fancy psychological language. It's something far more complicated than that. Far more human than that. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on one of the most misunderstood truths about INFJs and INTJs, why these two rare personality types, despite being some of the warmest and most deeply caring people on the planet, secretly struggle to genuinely connect with the vast majority of people around them. Why small talk feels like sandpaper on their skin. Why shallow friendships drain them faster than almost anything. And why that invisible 1% of people who actually get them becomes the entire world to them. Stay with me, because by the end of this, things are going to make a whole lot more sense. They're not antisocial, they're exhausted. Let's clear something up, because this misconception causes a lot of unnecessary pain. INFJs and INTJs are not antisocial. They don't wake up in the morning with some secret agenda to avoid humanity. In fact, both types, especially INFJs, carry an extraordinary capacity for empathy and connection. So what's the problem? The problem is that connecting costs them something enormous. When an INFJ walks into a social setting, they're not just processing words and faces. They're reading the emotional undercurrents in the room. They're picking up on what people aren't saying. They feel the tension between two people who are pretending to be fine. They notice the sadness hiding behind someone's loud laughter. This kind of hyper-awareness doesn't switch off just because someone wants to grab drinks on a Friday night. It runs constantly in the background like an app that never closes. For INTJs, it's a different kind of exhaustion, but just as real. INTJs process everything through an internal framework of logic and strategy. Most social interactions, let's be honest, don't pass that test. They're full of redundant conversations, emotional posturing, and information that goes absolutely nowhere. An INTJ doesn't hate people for engaging in these things. They just find them profoundly, almost painfully, uninteresting. So when you combine constant emotional absorption for the INFJ and constant intellectual disappointment for the INTJ, you get two people who return home from almost every social encounter feeling like they've run a marathon. And naturally, over time, they become extremely selective about who they let into their orbit. The small talk problem. Ask any INFJ or INTJ how they feel about small talk, and you'll get a sigh, a groan, or a very polite change of subject. And look, this isn't them being snobby. It's not that they think whether conversations are beneath them. It's that small talk, by its very design, keeps people at a surface level. It fills silence without filling space. For INFJs and INTJs, a conversation that doesn't move anywhere, that doesn't go deeper, doesn't reveal something real, doesn't connect two human beings in some meaningful way, feels like spending an hour walking on a treadmill. You end up exactly where you started. Both types are built for depth. INFJs naturally gravitate toward conversations about feelings, values, meaning, and the human experience. INTJs want to talk about ideas, systems, patterns, theories, and the mechanics behind things. When they meet someone who can go there with them, the connection sparks instantly. But when they're stuck in a loop of, so what do you do for work? And, did you catch the game last weekend? They slowly, quietly start to disappear inside themselves. This is where the 99% number starts to take shape. Not because most people are bad or boring, but because most social interactions in our culture are deliberately designed to stay shallow. And for INFJs and INTJs, shallow is almost physically uncomfortable. They can smell fake from a mile away. Here's something that very few people outside these two types fully appreciate. INFJs and INTJs are extraordinarily good at detecting inauthenticity. For INFJs, this is largely an intuitive gift. They can feel when someone's words don't match their intentions. They notice when someone laughs too hard to seem likable, or compliments them in a way that feels calculated rather than genuine. Their gut sends up a red flag almost instantly, sometimes before they even have the language to explain why they feel uneasy. INTJs detect inauthenticity through a different lens, a logical one. They observe patterns in behavior. They notice inconsistencies between what someone says on Monday and what they do by Thursday. They watch for gaps between stated values and actual choices. And once an INTJ catches that gap, it's very, very difficult for them to unknow it. But there's a sharper edge to this that rarely gets named: hypocrisy. When someone preaches kindness and then backstabs a coworker, or talks about honesty while telling obvious lies, it isn't just annoying to an INFJ. It's morally offensive. For INTJs, it registers as intellectual dishonesty, and intellectual dishonesty is practically unforgivable in their book. So while both types will sit quietly and say nothing, because they're both very good at keeping their reactions under wraps, inside, the door is already closing. 10 open tabs. There's a sensory and emotional dimension to why INFJs and INTJs pull away from most people that doesn't get nearly enough attention. Ever notice how they can feel more drained after a party than after an entire day of work? That's no coincidence. Both types process the world internally first, which means every single person in a crowded room becomes another tab open in their mental browser. 10 people, 10 tabs, all running at once, all demanding attention. No wonder the battery drains so fast. And here's the kicker: most of those tabs aren't offering much in return. Loud music, overlapping conversations, forced small talk with someone's coworker's cousin. It adds up quickly. So when an INFJ or INTJ ducks out of a party early or skips the group hangout altogether, it's rarely about disliking the people specifically. It's about protecting the very limited bandwidth they have left for something real. INFJs can be the warmest, most engaging person in the room at a party, and then go home and need 2 full days alone to recover. People who don't understand this get confused. They saw the INFJ smiling and laughing and connecting. What happened? What happened is that the INFJ gave everything they had in that room, and now they need silence to refill. Why most friendships don't last. Both INFJs and INTJs experience a disproportionately high rate of friendship dissolution, and it's rarely because of dramatic fallout. It's usually something quieter and sadder than that. Most friendships are built on proximity and shared routine. You're colleagues, so you grab lunch. You're in the same friend group, so you show up at the same parties. These friendships work for a lot of people. They provide connection and community without requiring too much vulnerability. For INFJs and INTJs, though, these friendships have a shelf life. Once the shared proximity disappears, once someone changes jobs or moves away or life circumstances shift, the friendship fades because there was never enough emotional or intellectual substance underneath it to hold it up. Meanwhile, the rare friendships they build on genuine connection, the ones where they actually chose each other, the ones that hold real conversations and survive disagreements and grow over time, those can last decades. But they also take years to build, because neither type trusts quickly or opens up casually. So over and over again, they watch surface-level friendships come and go, while the deep ones they're constantly searching for seem impossibly hard to find. Softening the verdict. Here's where fairness matters, because this isn't here to paint INFJs and INTJs as flawless. That same sharp intuition that helps them read people accurately can also tip into unfair judgment. Sometimes they write someone off after one awkward first impression, without giving that person a real shot to show growth or nuance. Sometimes the inner critic gets too loud, and this person seems shallow quietly becomes, this person is shallow, full stop, case closed. Growth for both types usually starts with one shift: staying curious instead of jumping straight to conclusions. Not everyone who seems surface level actually is. Some people just haven't learned how to go deep yet, or they're protecting themselves with different tools. Holding the door open a little longer before deciding who gets to walk through it, that's where real growth happens. It doesn't mean lowering their standards. It just means allowing for the possibility of being wrong. The 1% they actually love. When an INFJ or INTJ finds their person, that rare soul who actually matches their wavelength, the connection they form is one of the most extraordinary things either type experiences. They're not capable of half measures with people they truly love. They don't do surface level with their chosen few. They show up completely. They remember everything. They think about how to support someone long before that person even knows they need it. INFJs become the friend who calls you out of nowhere because they had a feeling something was wrong, and something was wrong. They become the partner who loves you not despite your mess but because they've seen the whole thing and chose you anyway. INTJs become the friend who will spend 2 hours helping you solve a problem at midnight without making it a big deal. They become the partner who builds a life alongside you with quiet, steady intentionality, not because love is a feeling to them, but because it's a choice they make and remake every single day. This is what all that selectivity is for. This is why the 1% matters so much. Because when they love you with the same depth and ferocity they pour into everything else. And that's not something most people have ever experienced. The quiet peace. At the end of the day, INFJs and INTJs don't dislike people. Not really. What they dislike is pretending. Pretending a conversation is meaningful when it isn't. Pretending a smile is genuine when it's not. Pretending shallow connection is enough when their whole nervous system is quietly screaming for something real. Their distance from 99% of the crowd isn't rejection. It's protection. It's a boundary built by minds that feel too much and see too clearly to fake their way through empty interactions. If you're an INFJ or INTJ watching this, your struggle to find your people isn't evidence that something is broken inside you. It's evidence that you know exactly what real connection feels like, and you've refused to settle for less. Keep your standards. Guard your energy. The right people will get it, and when they do, everything will finally make sense.